So please bear with me while I get everything together. If I don't freeze my off first. Anyway, one of the reasons I'm here today is it's an important day for UK politics. Starmer is visiting your man Donald Trump over there to have very important discussions, obviously to do with tariffs, the big one Ukraine, NATO, and Europeans' role. Very interesting. Before we dive into that, I wanna just have a little piece, a little look at a piece from James O'Brien of the LBC discussing hard and soft power.
But even a stopped clock is right twice a day. And albeit that it's a relatively tiny proportion of our national expenditure, it is a big enough proportion.
See, the idea is they've taken money, following DOG you could say, from overseas donations, and they're using that to increase the portion of the GDP that goes into their NATO contributions, which supposedly the UK has neglected with other European countries for quite some time. But due to Donald Trump's recent, just say put his foot down on Europe, so the leaders are having to hands into the wallets and find ways as painless as possible of raising money
of our national expenditure to have a little bit sliced off the top and pushed instead into the defence budget, into the military budget.
Right.
And I'm interested, as always, in what this actually means. And I don't know that you can answer that question without having a slightly better understanding of what the difference is between hard power and soft power. We're fairly clear on what hard power is. Hard power, in its simplest terms, is guns and troops, or planes and flyers, or boats and sailors. It is the bodies and the... I never know if ordnance is the right word to use, and I often say it wrong as well. God, I'm very Catholic with a big C this morning, aren't I? It's almost in hash.
Just to interrupt briefly, it's a lovely scene out here. You've got the other side of the bridge, Thames, all the bridges going down the way into London, and you've got the Blackfriars railway line blocking the view there, but it's a similar thing, which I'll show you a little bit later. But just before we progress, I want to have a quick word from our sponsors, Small Debts. If you're having trouble claiming money owed to you, need somebody in your corner, these are the people to look to for support.
You've been unfairly charged or conned by a company? At Small Debts, no company is too big and no debt too small. Small Debts is here to help.
There you have it. If you're owed money, you've done work, or you've claimed for a retail product and you're waiting for your refund to come in, and you get into that point of despair, look up Small Debts. Their details are in the description. Without further ado, yes, press on.
Territory. I'm apologising for everything, but ordnance is one of those words I know I often get wrong, and I may have just got it wrong again. What's a less pretentious word than ordnance for describing the stuff that you spend military budgets on that isn't actually the wages of the military? I can't just say, guys. Is there another better word? I don't know, but I know what hard power is. Hard power is bodies and I nearly said bangs. Does bangs work? Bangs doesn't work. But bodies and equipment. It's a boat equipment. But yeah, right.
Okay, in a nutshell, what he's trying to say, hard power is when you go in there with your military might, military force that you spent your money on, and you get people to agree with you using the doctrine of might is right. Soft power is where you give money to other countries, support various causes, and yes, say financially make friends with your, not always allies, and get your way in that manner. Hard and soft power. So I want to take a look before we really get into it at the
British Prime
BBC's
Minister Sir Keir Starmer has announced what he says amounts to the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. The change in policy comes ahead of his visit to Washington on Thursday to meet US President Donald Trump. Spending on defence will increase to 2.5% of GDP.
Have you know, this is the said Thursday. So he's probably there now. He's either had his meeting or he's getting ready for his meeting, because usually are 5 hours ahead of us in certain parts of the States.
By 2027 and 3% by 2030. It means that from 2027 the UK will spend an extra £13.4 billion a year on defence. The money for the uplift in 2027 will come from the international aid budget, which will be cut from 0.5 to 0.3% of national income.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of...
Just friendly facts, geographically speaking. When Kier Starmer was speaking, for those of you who are abroad, he was in that part of Westminster. That would be in the other direction. He was down there in Parliament, Whitehall. That's where they're based. That's where they do their thing.
GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027. And we will maintain that for the rest of this Parliament. And let me spell that out, Mr. Speaker. That means spending £13.4 billion.
So all he has to do now is explain that to your President Donald Trump and hope that he's in agreement and he thinks that that contribution is large enough.
More on defence every year from 2027. But Mr. Speaker, we also face enemies that are sophisticated in cyber attacks, sabotage, even assassination. And so our intelligence and security services are an increasingly vital...
Listen, you don't want to talk to Donald Trump about assassination. He's had 2 attempts we know of to date.
Protecting both us and our allies. So on top of the funding of 2.5% that I've just announced, going forward we will recognise the incredible contribution of our intelligence and security services to the defence of the nation, which means...
Yeah, I think that's all good. I'm going to move on now to Good Morning Britain, where you got these 2 guys who basically discussing the same thing. As a matter of fact, let's go to Channel 4 first.
eToro presents How to Invest in Stocks in 30 Seconds. Just open the app, click Discover, pick a stock, and hit Trade.
Right.
Kier Starmer said today we were in a world where everything has changed. He said that was due to President Putin's aggression against Ukraine, but that was 3 years ago. What's just changed is a force across the Atlantic, which Europeans are finding impossible to restrain. It was President Macron in the White House yesterday with President Trump. It'll be Kier Starmer in this seat on Thursday.
That was a very interesting meeting. I mean, you could almost get the idea that Macron and Trump have got a little system worked out with all the eyes on them, all those cameras and reporters, and they're doing their hand jiggy. It's almost like they're kind of passing on messages using touch. I wouldn't put it past them.
Today's announcement, like an effort to sweeten that very difficult encounter.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. 0.5
by 2027 and 3% of GDP after 2030, funded by a £6 billion saving in the aid budget. Are you Nigel Farage in disguise?
Nigel Farage didn't even turn up to the debate.
Essentially what they're saying is it's time for them to pull their weight, and they got to do their bit.
Doesn't cover a key government priority or mission, I'd be very worried indeed. Even if I was the NHS, or even if I was the Parliament for Energy and Net Zero, I might still be a bit concerned because the world has changed and maybe the government's priority.
So who's it going to affect? Who might it affect when they start cutting these donations to organisations abroad? Or contributions?
Things will change at the same time.
It was Kier Starmer's message, wasn't it? It's the logic of what he said.
If we're spending more on defence, ultimately that will mean eventually higher taxes or lower spending on something else.
Thank you very much indeed.
Kier Starmer's still young government is yet again taking a different political shape, stirred by a phenomenal switch in America's willingness to protect others.
Sure.
5 months.
Well, finally, a bit of predictability in this equation, because most of us, let's face it, have been predicting all week that Kier Starmer would put a hard date on increasing defence spending before he went to Washington, and two, that he would pay for the hike by raiding the foreign aid budget. So no real surprises yesterday, but here's the thing. Donald Trump is getting every single thing that he wants.
I said on Monday, there is method in Trump's madness. He is forcing European countries to commit to raising their defence spending, which is what he wanted. Britain. So over goes Kier Starmer, kowtowing to the President of the United States tomorrow.
Maybe.
Oh, Mr. President, look what I've done. I've raised it. He wasn't going to do that anytime soon, probably not before 2030. He's done. Now, I, for one, think it's the right thing to do, and I think we should cut the international aid budget. I think it's bloated, and I think we should be...
I'll tell you what, yeah? This is what I believe is happening, or what's going to happen over time. The DOG... A lot of these new manoeuvres that Trump's administration are applying to the political system over there, I do believe, well, already Starmer is taking the leaf from Trump's book. I do believe we're going to adopt a lot of these methods, basically, is what I'm trying to say, over time. I think the British are going to observe, watch, see what battles he has to fight to get some of these changes through, and with the Dems opposing and other forces, and see what also works in a practical way, how much money they save or return to the taxpayer's pocket. And we're gonna find ourselves adopting some of these methods here in the UK. Mark my words.
Supporting our defence sector, but this is going to really stick in the craw of a lot of Labour MPs who think we are playing now to Donald Trump's tune.
I'd love a penny for the thought of Gordon Brown.
Yeah.
Big advocate, the last Labour Prime Minister, big advocate of international aid. I think it's absolutely shameful. And Kier Starmer should take a pair of knee pads when he kneels before Donald Trump in order to protect his rather expensive suits, particularly if it's one of those that was bought for him.
It's politically shrewd, though, isn't it? Because of all the sources for the money to pay.
What's shameful about Trump having the second term, when in his first term, the first incantation of Donald Trump and his administration threw some shots out to NATO, gave a warning, said you guys have to start paying your part and don't just rely on us. This is Trump 2.0, whatever you want to describe it, 2025. They've been forewarned. Now he's just shutting the door to the bank and saying we paid our bit, you guys pay yours. Oh, I don't see what's shameful about that. But we're all entitled to our opinions.
This extra defence spending, taking it from foreign aid is going to be the least unpopular.
Yeah, great. Right. So he's going to have dead people around the world. That's what he's going to have. The people who are the world's thirstiest, hungriest, don't have clean water, don't have toilets, don't get educated, don't have proper shelters. And that will make Britain unsafer, because aid spending in an era of uncertainty and instability.
An era of soft power being withdrawn.
Helps people stay in their home countries. You might as well brace for extra people coming to the channel to go on
what
small
many people
boards.
would see as justifiable aid programmes. For example, sexual health programmes across Africa, malnourished children being fed into them. Very few people would argue with that. They would argue with, this is where some of our millions went last year, all-female traditional Chinese opera in Shanghai, rural crafts exhibitions in Shenzhen, and in Mexico City, apparently, we paid...
Look, you heard some of that. Can you justify it? Okay, culture, but is it the UK taxpayers' responsibility to fund the cultural aspirations of far and distant lands away from our shores? Is it the UK taxpayers' responsibility when we have a continuously struggling NHS, we have issues over here that all require funding? Housing shortage, a generation of people who are leaving college, leaving school, joining the workplace, and feel they have no hope of ever buying their own property unless they have the support of their parents or some other kind of financial backing. And now they're talking about conscription. And some of these youngsters are saying, well, what am I joining up to fight for? I don't even believe in half of these things, even though it is, their country, our country. But they've got an argument, they've got a point. So I question some of what I hear in the media.
Quite a lot of money for a temporary cycle lane.
Look,
it's those projects which make people mad.
I was writing.
And we're giving 500 million to farms.
I was writing
in Africa when we're screwing our farmers here on inheritance tax.
Hang on, you could
outrageous.
You could buy food and feed someone for a day, or you can improve farming and you'll feed them for a year. That's why you invest in farms and try and make those economies.
Why can't we invest in our farms here?
Well, we do.
Well, listen, these guys had a good little back and forth. I've heard enough. Before we close down, I just want to touch on, because we know this meeting is probably taking place now between Starmer and Trump. I just want to touch on some of the predictions of how they think.
Privileged to bring into the conversation now Woody Johnson, the businessman, owner of the New York Jets NFL team, and crucially the former US ambassador to the UK.
This discussion was very interesting. I learned a lot.
During Donald Trump's first term and also a donor to Mr. Trump. Thank you very much for joining us, Ambassador Johnson. First things first, Donald Trump, is he good news for the UK?
I think he's good news for the world and for America. That's for sure.
And in terms of the relationship with the UK?
The last 30 days, it'll give you a good indication of what's to come.
And in terms of that specific relationship, we often hear it referred to as the special relationship, which you'd have heard countless times. Do you think he has an affection for the UK? Because he often speaks about his mother, who, of course, was Scottish.
Yeah, and the Hebrides Island. Yes, I think he does have a natural affection for the UK.
How much of a tool in the armoury do you think are the royal family in all of this, Ambassador Johnson? Because we know, I think you met the president when he went to go and visit Buckingham Palace and meet the late Queen. That's clearly a sort of trump card that Kier Starmer could deploy.
You're absolutely right. I think that was the high point of his first presidency, was meeting her and spending time with her. She had a great sense of humor. She understood Trump, he felt. But I think she understood all world leaders. But Trump felt a special relationship with her, that's for sure.
And do you imagine that he will be keen to return to meet the king in this case?
I think he will. I think he absolutely will. Particularly if you lay out the red carpet like you did last time. I think he'd really enjoy that again.
Let's talk about Kier Starmer, because whilst they're both red politically, the Red Labour Party in the UK don't necessarily respond the same as the Republicans over in the United States. Some of Sir Kier Starmer's top team, take David Lammy, have made pretty disobliging comments about President Trump. Will he remember that?
100%.
That is one response.
And what will his view be?
He would remember that comment. And if you know Trump, I've known him for 40 years. He has an elephant's memory. And particularly for comments like that, he will remember everything.
Yeah, that's something I've observed about Trump. He will forgive, but he will rarely forget. And he's a businessman. So, if there's a good deal in the offing, he's not going to hold some, past name calling or worse against you.
But that doesn't mean he won't forgive.
Okay.
He can change. No, he can do that, and he has done it often, but he will not forget.
Of course, we saw in the case of J.D. Vance, for example, who made disobliging comments about the president and is now very much in the fold. In terms of if Kier Starmer had called you up, Ambassador Johnson, and said, how on earth do I deal with Donald Trump? I mean, how should he deal with the president? Because we saw Emmanuel Macron travel over to Washington on Monday.
Question.
Do you think Kier Starmer can take a leaf out of his book?
Yes, I think he can. I would agree with Trump on every, pretty much all the issues that are important to the president right now. And to the extent that the UK can help.
Do you think,
whether it's Ukraine or whether it's in trade or, the Green New Deal, which you guys are unfortunately suffering from, in my opinion, and probably his too, because he's drill, baby, drill. And the key to prosperity is that, is having plenty of cheap energy.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean you can't put it together.
Well, Kier Starmer's saying "build, baby, build," not quite "drill, baby, drill," but he's using some of the language. Talk to me about the president's relationship with Nigel Farage, because I'm not sure. I know obviously you know about the UK system, you know about UK politics. How do you view, for example, Reform and Nigel Farage?
I think Nigel Farage plays a part in the whole political British dialogue and represents a point of view.
Sure does.
Challenging the status quo. And I think the president is that's right up his alley, because he thinks the status quo.
I mean, you like Nigel Farage, you don't. He's definitely creeping up there behind the Conservatives over here in the UK and giving them some causes for concern.
Is certainly a way to go downhill fast. So from that standpoint, I think he takes, he looks at him as somebody that is a positive for the whole equation.
And you think he would perhaps like to see him as Prime Minister?
Oh, he hasn't gone there as far as I know.
Okay.
That's up to you guys.
Yeah, it very much is, although election's a long way away.
Yes.
Another thing that is frequently spoken about, and again, this was very much during your term when you were ambassador, is this idea of a trade deal. Now, we know Mr. Trump is famous for the art of the deal, as he likes to say.
It's all about trade. It's all about tariffs with Donald Trump. It took me a while to get it, but I did figure it out when he broke it down in many different ways. They press us, speaking in the context of Trump and the USA, with tariffs. He presses them with similar tariffs around the similar percentage brackets or whatever. And, you do your tug of war negotiating with tariffs and trade until everybody's felt a sufficient amount of pain and comfort, and then you get a balance somewhere. Makes a lot of sense. Sure does.
Think there is any scope there for Kier Starmer to talk about a sort of trade deal with the United States?
And another thing I'll just add, if you think about trade goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years into the history of human interaction right across the globe. Even before Christopher Columbus and anyone else you want to call out, the Egyptians building the pyramids, there were people on different parts of the globe, somehow navigating their way across, doing trade, and navigating their way back. Even though it might take years and months to travel, like back then, unlike overnight or matter of hours these days. Anyway,
of course, we're very worried over here about tariffs.
Right. Well, Europe should be worried at this point, I would think. I would start. I was working on a trade deal with Liz Truss and others for several years, and it always comes down to agriculture. So I would start with food, whether it's chlorinated chicken or whatever your regulations are to not import American agriculture, because I don't think unless something changes with agriculture, you're not going to get a deal.
That's interesting. In terms of the relationship that President Trump had.
Food for thought, you see. That's one thing I think in the UK they've been talking about Ukraine, talking about this, talking about that, talking about NATO, contribution to the UK military stockpile. What they've neglected, I think, as far as dealing with Trump, is trade, agriculture, the fundamental, everyday, basic needs of every nation, every society. Trump, I think, looks at all of these areas of, cross-continent international trade.
With the UK as well. We know he has that sort of the view of the royal family, for example, and he loves the pomp and ceremony of the UK. But would that make us immune to tariffs in any way? Is there any sort of wiggle room, do you think?
Perhaps there is. We've got a lot of. I think we have more troops over in your country than you do, but we're
imagine that.
We have at least 10,000 airmen and women there.
Would you imagine that? More American troops, you have more US troops here on British soil than British troops. Very strange concept. But he might be right. It might be an accurate assessment. I won't be surprised.
So we're a big part of the scene there. And so I think there is...
That's true.
The special relationship does count for something. But he's got 4 years. He's got 2 years to make things happen. As you've noticed from the first 30 days, he's moving extremely fast.
Rapido.
When you're moving this fast, I think the people that help him, he'll remember, and that help him accomplish the objectives, which are laudable in my opinion, are going to be viewed positively. And the opposite is also true, I think.
Trump 2, because you knew Trump 1, but he's had 4 years where he was out of office and he was sitting on the sidelines watching how Joe Biden did. Many of those people who were around President Trump first time around, take for instance John Bolton, who's frequently on the UK media, are no longer there.
This is all very interesting. I'm chilling my coffers off here, so I don't want to spend much longer. You kind of got the gist. Starmer's over the Atlantic now, over your side of the pond, prepping himself, or in the process of meeting with Donald Trump, discussing whatever he thinks is beneficial to our side, the UK side, and jousting with Trump, conversationally speaking, to kind of meet somewhere, probably not in the middle, but somewhere that is hugely beneficial for the US and slightly beneficial for us in the UK. Or at least something that Starmer can come back and say, lads, ladies, this is what I've got for you. Negotiations went well. No hard feelings were held based on things that might have been said in the media against Trump before he got back into power. Because I think there were many doubters. Many thought during Biden's reign they wouldn't have to see Trump in that position of power on the throne again. But that is exactly what happened. So that's going to be a good lesson for a lot of the European leaders. I'm sure it's been learnt. But right now, Starmer is the one carrying the baton. And, he wants to keep the speed up, the momentum. He doesn't want to kind of fall too far behind in the negotiation rankings. So we'll see. We'll see what he ends up with. For now, before I go, I just want to, if you bear with me, give you a little glimpse, a little look at our beautiful nighttime landscape. So that's the Thames, the lovely Thames River that if you know London, if you don't know London, historically, so it's been there. I guess it's like the Hudson or something, and one of those ones. So there's a little bit of a waterfront. You got these waterfronts going for miles right throughout London, if you don't know London, right across by the Thames. Lots of luxury apartments, which they are still building. Seem to be building forever. Quite a modern skyline. A lot of tall buildings, skyscrapers. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. Oh yes, go to 3. See if that works. And about. Zoom out. Right, and zoom in. That's it. It's a bit better. Okay. Look at that. Look how the light hits the water. Beautiful. Nice, crisp winter's evening. Can even see a bit of the sky. Although with light pollution and all of that, you don't get to see much of it. So right down there, you can't quite see it, but that's in the direction of Parliament and Whitehall. This is all Westminster. If I turn it round a little bit, this is Blackfriars Bridge. London is full of bridges. If you look down there, that is, I think, Southwark Bridge. Yes. So we're on Blackfriars Bridge. I think the next bridge, if that train line wasn't there, you could see further, would be London Bridge, I do believe. So you've got some boats still working along the waterfront. Back in the day, that was a way they used to move trade along, I think. Right over there, that building on the corner, I'm not sure what it is, but a lot of these buildings are to do with the running of the country, the business, the ebb and flow. And where you see St. Paul's over there and the kind of surrounding structures, that's kind of the city of London, where they do all of their trade, do all of the trading. You can't quite see some of the skyscrapers, but let me zoom out a bit here. But that's our landscape, Blackfriars Bridge and the Thames. Oh, I didn't show you that side. Let me really zoom out so you can see much more. Right, that's a nice eatery, British pub over there, right on the waterfront. Go further down, can't really see that much. You've got the Bankside Hotel behind this pub, and that road there goes towards South London, which is where I reside. Because you've got all of these massive, let me give you a shot, these massive tall skyscrapers. That kind of takes away a lot of our, the scenic aspect of the landscape. Well, I don't want to bore you with too much of all of that. It's been great spending some time with you again. I'll be back out here probably in Whitehall or Parliament Square when Starmer returns, and we'll do another story. So once again, myself, you've been listening to Only Radio. Again, excuse me. You've been listening to Only Radio once again here at CornerSpeak. So, as usual, be good, be safe, be creative. We out.